Welcome to day 17 of Daily Discipleship. Yes, you really can change. And I hope you're beginning to experience more and more of that. It's been a great time as we're going into training. And today we're going to look at verse 28. And let me just read it for you. It says, "He who steals must steal no longer, but rather he must labor, performing with his own hands what is good." Purpose clause, so that he may have something to share with the one who has need. And I've talked about this whole training station as about financial stewardship, work ethic. And let me just say the habit is this. The habit is about being diligent. Yes, it talks about stealing, but you notice you don't steal, but you do something else in order so that you can give. Very interesting too, the word here for share is not like writing a check to the church. It's a very personal, it connotates meeting very specific personal needs with people in your relational network or with someone that has a need that you meet. It's the idea of that person who steals, which is basically, I want the product without the process, right? I mean, if you were at an ATM and let's just say you got out $200 or $300 and someone walks up with a gun and says, "Will you please give that to me?" And of course, here's what to do. Just give it to him. But what they want is they want the product without the process. That $300 was hours and time and energy of when you worked. And so this is really about the habit. It's more than just actually stealing. The training objective is financial stewardship and with this idea of a work ethic. The training command is steal no longer. Literally, this is kind of interesting. Grammatically, it's stop stealing. In the ancient world, because of the situation, and still in many countries around the world, stealing was very, very common. In the baths, when people would take their clothes and lay them aside, stealing would happen. In the marketplaces, stealing was rampant. And so when you became a follower of Jesus, the idea that you don't steal any longer, I mean, that's how some people made their living. And it got to the point where it really wasn't wrong unless you got caught. And he says, no. We're going to develop the habit. We're going to be diligent. Notice the training actions. Put off stealing, renew, recognize the value and the purpose of work, and then we're going to put on working to the Lord. Let me ask you a question here, because I think sometimes we unconsciously slide into the TGIF mentality. And what I mean by that is that there's this idea that pleasure, relaxation, that work is like a burden, that it's just something you have to do. Do as little as possible to get as much as possible. And the fact of the matter is, work is something that God gave us before the fall. Work isn't evil. It's not something to get out of. Now, too much work or making your whole focus work, that can be a problem. But before the fall, we're made in the image of God, and God is a workman. In fact, he calls us, are you ready for this? We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, that he ordained from the foundations of the earth. In other words, when God sees you, when he sees the world, he is a workman he's created, and he said, I want you to co-labor with me. And so work is a holy thing. So it's not the shortcut mentality. It's not how do I get the product without the process. It's I put that off, and then I realize the value and the purpose of work, that I'm made in the image of God. It's not something to get out of. It's a way to express who God made me with my gifts. And then notice what we put on. We work unto the Lord. Colossians 3:23 and 24. Whatever you do your work heartily, as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. Can you imagine the difference mentality in relationships, and whether it's work around the house, or whether how you teach your children to work, or whether it's where you go to work? If you saw it as, I'm not working for this company, I'm not working for this supervisor, I'm working for Jesus Christ. I'm going to do my work in such a way that it would be honoring and pleasing to him. I prepare in that way. I execute that way. That's my motives. I will tell you, amazing testimony when you meet someone who's a follower of Christ that's cultivated this habit of being diligent and doing their work unto the Lord. Early on in my Christian life, there was a bricklayer, an actual bricklayer. And God had really done something in his life. And by day, he laid brick. And then by night, actually, he would come to the college campus where I went to school. And I had just become a Christian, right before I left for college. And he came down within that first week, and he knew a couple people. I got in a Bible study with him. Well, I ended up 6 or 7 years after college, went to grad school. We did a ministry together. And during that interim between college and grad school, I needed a job. And he goes, well, why don't you come work with me? And I said, well, what do you want me to do? He says, you can be my hod carrier. I said, what's a hod carrier? He said, well, you mix up all the mud and you carry the block and you carry the brick, and we'll do foundations and, chimneys. And it is the hardest work I've ever done in my life. Literally, I remember the first day after a day's work, I woke up and my arms, I couldn't get them down from lifting those tongs of bricks and the big, 60-pound buckets of mud. But I'll never forget what I learned about work from Dave. High school educated, godly man, investing in these college students that are now all across the world. And I remember he came in one day and we had laid a foundation, those big Haydite blocks up about 2.5, 3 feet all the way around. And he started looking and he took the line and looked at it. Then I'll never forget, he walks around and with his boot, he started kicking it down this wall. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? In fact, I said, Dave, what are you doing? I said, I mixed all that mud. I carried all this block. And he goes, no, it's out. I said, well, like how much? He goes, well, about 1 inch. I said, that's not going to affect the house. Is that beyond code? He goes, it's not beyond code. It's beyond my code. I said, what do you mean beyond your code? He says, Chip, you need to understand something. I'll never forget this. He said, it might be good enough for an inspector, but it's not good enough for God. I'm not building. I get up every day and I do my work for him. He's my boss. And his standard on this one is higher than the code. And I remember cleaning off all those blocks, remixing all that. And I don't know how many sermons you've heard about integrity or not stealing or not cutting corners. That's the greatest sermon I ever heard. It changed the course of my life. The training apparatus is write out your to-be list. You say, well, what's a to-be list? Well, we all have a to-do list, right? Here's the thing I'm supposed to do. It was out of this process that I literally sat down and I thought to myself, who do I want to be? And I came up with, I want to be a man of God. I want to be a great husband. That may sound arrogant, but I thought, does my wife want a good husband or a great husband? She wants a great husband. I want to be a great father. I want to be a great friend. And just because of my background, I want to be someone who stays in shape the rest of my life. And then I took that to-be list and then I put it in my calendar and I wrote out what I needed to do, and that I would meet with God, and that I have a date once a week with my wife, and that I would spend personal time with each of my kids, that we would eat dinner together. And I came up with a structure that required diligence and work, and it was hard. And I noticed how, as I did that, how my life changed 3 years, and then 7 years, and then 10 years, and the capacity. And what I realized was the more I became like Jesus, the easier things were, and the impact that I saw of not taking shortcuts literally shaped my life. I want to encourage you, go into training. Go into training about who you want to become. Ask God to make it very clear what really matters. Everybody wants a shortcut. Everyone kind of wants to steal a little time, or think that, we'll just get someone else to really raise our kids, or let's have someone else make this easier. There's certain things that are challenging, they're hard, they require diligence, and they're worth it. Got some questions there I want to ask you, and an assignment that's going to help you on your journey.